Man, I am so hungry.
Did you call?
Oh, hey there, Grand Meow. I didn't know you were here.
I'm always here.
Right, yeah.
So, are you looking for some food then?
Yeah, I am super hungry, but I'm all out of zenny.
Oh, Cotton, don't worry your sweet little paws one bit. This one's on the house.
Oh, Grand Meow, you shouldn't do that. You're just the best. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, today is a day about respect, about happiness and positivity in the community. Okay, fine. Today is a day we talk about the things that people love the most in a category that is arguably incredibly important to Monster Hunters the series, the monsters. But as always, I will probably disagree with you guys, and you will probably disagree with each other and with me, so even a social experiment started on the best of intentions on the happiest of topics will no doubt run itself into the ground with aggressive debates on the topic. So how about we stop pretending and just admit we are all going to yell at somebody about this by the time this video is over. Today, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for a dissection of the official community-generated list of the top 5 best monsters in all of Monster Hunter. It's unusual, it's quirky, and it's gonna be full of twists and turns, so strap yourself into the seatbelt and then ask why there's a seatbelt where you're sitting.
Damn it, I want to be a part of this thing.
If you want to take part in next week's list, the top 5 worst monsters in all of Monster Hunter, whether that is your least favorite, most hated, worst moveset, having, ugliest, stupidest, or whatever worst means to you specifically, the link to vote is in the description of the video you are watching right this moment. This one. If you do vote on this topic, make sure to leave a comment on this video saying why you feel the way that you do, and you may even see your comment on screen next week. For those who don't know, I have absolutely no influence on the outcome of this list, not even creating the options to vote for themselves, instead leaving that up to you guys to fill up and out, only stepping in for tiny bits of moderation every once in a while when someone inevitably enters a ridiculously offensive thing. Usually I tend to allow sillier answers, but due to how broad and all-encompassing today's list is, there are so many legitimate answers that the silly stuff is almost completely unnoticeable. Almost. So, getting to the core of the experience, we'll be going over this list of the top 5 best monsters in the series as voted by you, followed by a little graph-based analysis of the experiment as a whole. So without further ado, let's begin with...
Number 5, with 5.41% of the votes.
He's been struck by lightning. How many times is it now, Reg?
6 times. 66 times.
Legiacris.
If you like Mimul, you like Legiacris. Legiacris is such an iconic monster from the 3rd generation and the flagship monster of MH Tri. His design is amazing, a blue lizard fish thing that has crystals on his back that literally explode with electricity.
I don't know about that first line. I think Namiel is a bit different and more complex than Legiacris, but yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from and agree that they are on a similar wavelength. I do agree that his design is awesome for sure, but would liken him a bit closer to a crocodile-eel mix, which is really cool as a concept for sure. As for being a flagship, remember this part for later.
That was a hard one, but I have to go with Logi. It's the monster that made me fall in love with MH and pair with Plesioth. Its design is just so beautiful and powerful.
Sorry, did you just list Plesioth as a monster that made you fall in love with... Are you a masochist? Probably, but so is Legiacris, clearly, given so many of you love hunting him and he is still fighting you every single time. He does have one of those designs that I love though, where a creature looks equally as graceful and pretty as it does powerful and scary from a predator level.
Number 4, with 5.53% of the votes.
I'll go on from here. Sonic!
Nergigante.
Nergi is to be the best monster for me, even though he was such a pain in the arse the first time I fought him. I still thought it was so badass that he eats other elder dragons, and at the end of Iceborne we are told that he is there to keep balance in the new world. And don't even get me started on how much I like his fighting mechanics.
Yep, that's a lot of terminology I've seen used to describe Nergigante in the past. This all fits my records completely. Nergigante is a legitimate force of nature, equivalent to the monster Grim Reaper in this sense, where most monsters have predators that end their time on this plane of existence at whatever time is necessary or required. Elder dragons are usually uncontested until they naturally die, releasing bioenergy wherever the hell they wind up dying, because they have no concept of what bioenergy really is. They're just elder dragons. They don't know what they do when they die. Nergigante exists to balance that out.
I have to go with Nergigante as best monster. He is basically the Wolverine of Monster Hunter. You can't top that. I just wish that his arch-tempered theme was his regular theme.
He is Wolverine, yes, regenerative ability, growing spikes that even turn metallic for his variant. I mean, it's pretty clear what's going on here, guys. What is a little unclear, however, is...
Number 3 with 6.19% of the votes.
Want to see me run to that mountain and back? You want to see me do it again?
Valstrax.
Really like Volstrax because of his moveset, music, and ecology, since he is pretty much a naturally evolved jet aircraft. High cotton.
Hello, Malachi Lewis. Valstrax does have an amazing moveset. I mean, his design allowed the devs so much freedom to work with when crafting his abilities and attacks. From the reversible wing fingers to the various ways that he can fire out Dragon Element, he has an extremely diverse and interesting fight.
Volstrax is just, I don't know, he's always just kinda clicked with me. General Yu was my first MH game, and his armor and weapons looks all cool.
Interesting, your first Monster Hunter game. I wonder if that will come up later. As for the click, I get that. Sometimes you just fight a monster and it feels right. It feels like Monster Hunter at that immediate moment, at that singular moment in time. You feel like a Monster Hunter. I understand that. Do you?
Number 2 with 6.61% of the votes.
Fuck you, gone! Boom!
Zinogre.
Zinogre is the best monster to me. He has the perfect synergy of fight and ecology, and his fight is very fun. I also like his visual design, as controversial as that may be.
I absolutely love Zinogre, and while I am surprised that he's so high up on this list, I'm not at all surprised that he's here in general. A classic beloved monster for a relatively simple yet inspired design. A wolf who has insects that live in his shell to provide him with access to powerful electric abilities. Absolutely awesome. His fight is great and unique, where most monsters described as being fast in the series I would call athletic. Zinogre is one that I would instead call acrobatic, full of flips and spins and all types of flexible manner of movement to reach his intended location. And that was beforehand. He's also been brought to the New World, which is why it sort of makes sense that he's here, because he was always a beloved monster, but now he's been introduced to an entire new generation of monster hunters. And as a result, we have an entire new generation of Zinogre fans, years and years after he was first added to the series.
There's just something special about Zinogre. Perhaps it's how he moves with such elegance. Perhaps it's the kick-ass theme. Perhaps it is the fact that he is essentially an oversized doggo, and I want one as a pet.
And yeah, that's the other side of it. He was the first, and in some ways still is the most, dog-like monster in the series. And, you know, lots of people like dogs. It makes a lot of sense, guys.
Number 1 with 7.57% of the votes.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
Gore Magala.
Gore is both intimidating and cool, interesting in both lore and gameplay, and his lore is quite in-depth as well, with molting into Shagaru.
This is a big case for Gore Magala, if not the largest case. He is the king of edgy monsters, which already makes him a favorite of a subset of the community, but he also has some of the richest lore in the series, as well to satisfy hunters who are particularly into that side of things. On top of which, he is also extra mysterious, having no real classification, which makes him extra alluring.
While it's not my favorite monster, I've got to give best monster in the series to Gore Magala Shagaru. It had by far the most interesting new mechanics added to the game that were also a part of the biology of the monster itself, and the most engaging and interesting storyline we've gotten in a Monster Hunter game. The build-up and mystery kept me hooked the entire way through, and the hunt from the first to the last itself was extremely fun.
And that's part 2 of this whole thing with him. The entirety of Monster Hunter 4 and 4U were dedicated to the story of this monster and what he turns into, and the devastation that he can cause, creating what has often been hailed the best Monster Hunter story that we've ever had. And I think that ties into it a hell of a lot. Good story makes people like monsters more. You can have a monster with the coolest lore and biology imaginable, but if you don't show it to people in the game in meaningful and impactful, memorable ways, then people won't really notice as much. Gore is a monster that people really got to see a lot of, and I think that really left a lasting impression on a lot of people.
Dark, 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 dark.
And that's all the top 5, guys, which brings us right around to our analysis of what actually went on with all of these voting shenanigans. A first note, there were an absolutely ridiculous number of entries to this, including a very vast number of monsters selected. However, I can only realistically show the top 50 in the graph on the screen, so I'm sorry if your vote is not represented here. First thing of note, hey, you remember a couple of weeks ago we did a best Elder Dragon list? In second, we had Valstrax, and in first was Nergigante. I love that on this list, they actually wound up flipped, where Valstrax is third and Nergigante is fourth, which implies that many fans of Nergigante prefer other monsters when they can choose from more than just Elder Dragons. Another very large note, look at the top 5. What do they all have in common? They're flagship monsters, each the pillar of their own entire Monster Hunter game. What does that tell us? Well, first it tells us that they have their intended effect, to have a lasting impression on the player, but it could potentially mean another thing. I have to wonder for how many of these people, the monster they voted for was the flagship of their first game. Monster Hunter 4 for Gore Magala, World for Nergigante, Portable Third for Zinogre, etc. Because I'm starting to feel like the community has a bias towards the first flagship monster experience they have, or at the very least, the flagship monster experience of their favorite Monster Hunter game. Just something to ponder.
Stay out of my business. Get back to work.
And finally, you may notice that number 6 with a whopping 4.87% is actually Dodogama. Okay, we need to speak for a moment, guys. Real talk. Dodogama is great. He is amazing. I love him. He's super cute and fun and all of those things. But if you think that Dodogama is legitimately one of the best monsters in the series, I'd love to see why you think he stacks up with some of these other creatures that combine genius design with super fun fights. I mean, he was right ahead of Mizitsune, for Gog's sake. Oh, for Gog's sake, by the way, he was 12th. And that just about covers all of that, guys. A super interesting collection of information you have given me this week for this list / experiment / whatever you want to call it. As a reminder, if you want to vote on next week's community list, the top 5 worst monsters in all of Monster Hunter, whether that is your least favorite, most hated, worst moveset, having ugliest, or stupidest monster, whatever worst means to you, the link is in the description, and once again, feel free to share the survey with any friends you think would be interested in this as well. As the more votes we get, the better representation this list becomes of the opinions of the community as a whole. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been the top 5 best monsters in all of Monster Hunter. Do you agree with the majority on this one? Which list would you like us to revisit next? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or report important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Continent, Hollow, we're all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons, even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros, there's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.